Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prize Picks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 113th episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. I have with me today the New England Hockey Journal's Evan Marinofsky. Evan, thanks for joining us. How's everything going?
I'm happy to be here. It's good. August, so it's a little chiller, which is nice, and getting ready for camp and college recruitment, which is big going on right now in the hockey world. A lot of college. When we get off this, Ryan Poirier from Kent, good defenseman, just committed to Harvard, so I got to do something on that. And and I gotta say, Haggs, it's exciting. I know this isn't Bruins, but it's exciting watching these kids. I've been doing this 2 years now, so you start watching them when they're U14s and then seeing them commit. It's a cool thing. I have nothing to do with their careers. I didn't help them in any way, but it's just cool to see them commit. So I like this time of year for that reason.
That's awesome. I love to hear it. I love to hear that Ted Donato's getting a good player at Harvard. I actually do. Let's talk about this a little bit after we get through the beginning here of setting the table, because I find that interesting subject matter. I am your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe to a premium membership. Get all of my Bruins and NHL writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns for the Boston Sports Journal. You can check out my stuff at bostonsportsjournal.com as well. Sometimes I take questions from the Q&A at the Boston Sports Journal and use them here as well because they're such good questions. So we do that occasionally. I also want to give a little love to our sponsors real quick. Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100 with the Team USA racking up gold right now. This is a great time to use Prize Picks. So download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Let's also thank Game Time, phenomenal ticket service to get all your Red Sox and Fenway Park tickets. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So let's thank Game Time as well. One question for you, Evan, in the time that you've been doing this, like you said, for a couple of years, been covering guys at 14U, now they're committing to colleges. How much do you feel like, just anecdotally and from what you've seen, how much do the top players change from 14 to 17, 18? Like, how much have you noticed? Because you always hear from hockey coaches, they say the best player at 14 is not the best player at 16, not the best player at 18, and that a lot of things change in those years. How much do you feel like it's the same names you're hearing at 18 that you were hearing at 14, and how much of it do you feel like it kind of changes in those very key 4 years, obviously, when puberty is kicking in for a lot of these players and things change quite a bit?
It's an interesting question, and it'd be an interesting study of how kids evolved over those 4 years. From my 2 years of doing it, now I have not overseen a class go from 14 to 18, but one thing that stays, narratives on players stay the same for a long time. Players who are the top kids at 14, let's say they have a skating issue, that stays with them among people who maybe aren't watching them all the time forever. Oh, this kid, not a great skater. There's a kid, Jack Sadowski, actually, an interesting one. He was a Kimball Union this year, put up 87 points, UNH commit, and he was NHL draft eligible. And, scouts kept saying, oh, he can't skate, and that was a narrative that started when he was 14. Oh, his skating isn't good enough. Now, he didn't get picked, but again, his skating was fine. Like, he consistently outskated guys at the prep level. He's going to Cedar Rapids in the USHL this upcoming year. And I think he's someone that's going to age well. I think that take of him not being a good skater is going to age poorly. You do, though, often see different kids emerge at that 15 level. There are a lot of kids at the U14 level, and they'll play for, a Mount, or they'll play for, the Long Island Gulls, or maybe they're in prep, and it's like, holy crap, these kids are really good. They are definitely going to be program kids next year when the program is watching them for their 15 year. And they end up not even getting a camp invite. And
things change that dramatically in 1 year. Yeah.
Yep, and they do. And whether it be size, production, other kids catching up to them. And one thing you see at the 14 level, like I was at that Crimson Combine last week, is you have kids at the 14 level who are just bigger than everybody, and so they can just power pass kids, or they can just move right around them. That can't take the puck from them. And at the 15 level, though, other kids are getting bigger, and other kids are getting that size. And so I think those kids start to fall back a bit. They don't get worse; others just get better. It's another reason why a lot of those national team development program kids, if you're not one of those, top line or top 6 guys, some of those kids go back to juniors for a year before going to college, and they don't get drafted. They're all on the watch list. They're all considered. But that's why a lot of kids who weren't picked for the NTDP or even went to evaluation camp are above them, because they're better at 18 than they were at 15. So a lot changes. And I think that's one of the things that, like, I always try to write, and it's hard to get through to parents because you're living in the moment. You're about to go through this. A lot of parents are going through this now.
It's
You're
not
in the
hard.
moment.
It's not hard to get through to parents. It's impossible to get through to parents.
I know. I'm trying to be nice.
It's impossible.
Someday, I always say, someday I'll be a parent, and hopefully my kids, God willing, I have kids, and they'll play hockey, hopefully. And they'll be, however good they are, I'll think they're way better than they are. And
when it comes to parents, they hear what they want to hear, and that's it. Like that's pretty much what it is.
And that's the thing. And so I think when it comes to the kids moving and from U14 through 15, 16, 18, a lot changes. And Ben Merrill is a good example this year at St. Sebastian's. He got drafted by the Canadiens in the 6th round. He wasn't really on any radars 2 years ago, but he had a growth spurt. He got a lot better. And suddenly, he's committing to Harvard. And then he's, like a shoo-in to get picked somewhere in the draft. So a lot can change. And some don't. Some, like, the Mutrin boys are good examples. Like, those kids have just been good throughout, and they're going to, my guess is Teddy and Casey are both going to play pro hockey someday. They're both committed to BC now. They were nasty when they were 14, and that just kind of continued. But there are a lot of kids who are great at that 14 level who just kind of fade into the background. And it's hard to tell who's going to be that kid. Like, but like, for instance, and not to ramble here, like this past year, the Rivers 09s that you and I have watched, Carter Meyer, Finn Sears, and Sam Pandolfo, they succeeded as U14s against older kids, right? So that's a better indicator of, like, all right, those kids aren't just like really good among their own age group. They are just really good, to be able to go up against kids much older, to go up against seniors and score 2 goals. That means something. So, like, that's a different case. It comes into play with the kids just playing their own age group. The Mount kids, Long Island Gulls, South Kent, like that, the Shattuck kids, because they're really just playing their age group. That's when you see it. And that's when you see it kind of make the biggest difference.
Yeah, I that is always, for me, and I think for a lot of hockey evaluators, that is always a sign of somebody you need to take note of, somebody you need to watch, is if they're playing against older players at high levels and performing well. Like, if they're able to hold their own or dominate or, really excel against kids that are 2-3 years older, 1-2-3 years older than them. Like, I think that's when you start to really, like, you can take what you're seeing and say, okay, this is going to translate, like, for sure.
Yeah.
Like, and the Mutrin ones, they're an interesting example too, because, they come from a big time athletic family. Like, there's a track record there
very much
with their dad. So,
and their mom, Kathy Mutrin played lacrosse at BC too. So, like, they have a lot of athletic genetics. I mean,
and it was a foregone conclusion they were going to go to BC too, right? They were one of those.
Yeah, there was never really a question there of that. But it's funny. Like, what I would tell, like, a lot of Bruins fans are listening to this. What I would encourage everyone to do, if you because it's the summer, if you want to get into Bruins stuff, look into the backgrounds of a lot of these players and how they came up. Go look at their elite prospects pages, because they're all different. They're all very different. And that surprised you. I mean, Mason Lowry, I think he didn't make his Halinka team. He did not make his Halinka team that U17 or U18 year. And I remember talking to him in the dressing room and him still being angry about it. But that's a good example of someone who, like, even at 18 was not, was not peaking. He was not,
Yeah.
he was good. He was really good, but he wasn't, I guess, good enough to make us a Lincoln team. And I
Well,
think,
he also was. He must have been a younger kid for his a year, his birth year, because like I think he was overage when he got drafted too. He didn't get
yeah,
drafted the first time around when he could have gotten drafted either. He got drafted the following year by the Bruins. So, he's a great example on a lot of different levels of one of those players that, really pops later on and just continues to get better and better where, people weren't raving about him wherever he was when he was, 15, 16 years old. Um, Even though he continued to get better and better. And maybe that part of that is him switching to defenseman too, because I know that happened pretty late in his, youth hockey development sort of like pathway, was him going from forward to defenseman. So, maybe that had something to do with it too.
yeah, I
Especially
think it
with skilled
has.
kids. Like nowadays, like it's funny. There's so many more forwards than there are defensemen.
Oh yeah,
And, there's it's much there's a pathway to a lot of different opportunities if you can talk your kid into playing defense, or if he wants to play defense. Um, the higher level teams, higher level tournaments, better, a lot more playing time. Like
yep.
there's a lot of things. There's a lot of benefits to having your kid play defenseman rather than forward. Like
It's
all the
not as
kids.
tiring. It is not as tiring to play D, mainly because and I always notice this just from my own. This is my own observation from my own career because I was a defenseman. Like when I would jump up to forward and I've got to be active in the offensive zone, then I got to be active in the defensive zone, and you're up and down the ice. It can be tiring. I mean, you can get
Yeah,
used to it obviously. Whereas on D, in the offensive zone, you're at the blue line. You're moving, but you're not down low. You're not grinding it out down there.
yeah,
Whereas obviously in your own zone, it's different. But like an interesting case, like and a lot of Bruins fans will know this name, Freddie Meyer, former NHL player. His son, who's also named Freddie, or one of his older son, also named Freddie.
yeah.
Recently switched to defense. He was a good forward, but this past year switched to D. And so like again, it even happens at the 15, 16, 17 age group. There's never a wrong time to make the switch. You do see that. And like at the 14 level at that Crimson Combine I was at, there were a lot more standout forwards than standout D. My guess is that a couple of those forwards over the next couple of years go back to defense
Yeah.
because there's more spots there.
Yeah, no, there's more spots there. I feel like you're going to get more playing time, because a lot of times you run into, as a coach, you have a ton of forwards, but you don't have as many D. So they end up playing a lot more,
Yeah.
and you find a lot of kids that want to play D because they notice that. They notice you only have like 3 or 4 defensemen, and they're basically out there every other shift or
Yes.
double shifting at times. And it's like, it's an opportunity to go out there and play a ton. And, it can be exhausting playing defense if you're the kid that wants to try to go end to end all the time with the puck.
Yes. That too.
There are plenty of those type of defensemen out there too. That could get pretty tiring, but like the whole thing is really interesting. And just in general, having the whole game in front of you, playing defenseman, I think is a really good thing. Like Finn's obviously, my son's played forward pretty exclusively, like for the teams that he's played for, and he's likely going to be a forward, but like he plays D at least a few games for every team that he plays on. And, you have them practicing and playing D and doing it a decent amount of the time. So they have an understanding, even if they're playing forward a lot, how to play the position, because I think it helps your hockey IQ and it helps you understand the game. Not only if you're playing the different positions and you're playing all the positions, but also just when you have the whole game in front of you and you can see how everything's developing when you're on the back end and taking the puck up and, trying to make a first pass and, using your defensive partner and all the different stuff that goes into playing defense. And you're forced to communicate, I think, a lot more too, which is what kids like Finn's age group right now, that 10, 11 age group, they don't talk a lot to each other on the ice.
No.
So the really good ones do, but a lot of them don't. And the only time they do is when they're calling for the puck, like pass it to me.
Give it to me. Come on.
Yeah. So like, that also playing defenseman, I think forces you to communicate a little bit more, talking to your partner, telling them, if you're going to get the puck and the other guy's going to stay in front, or, where you are to be like the safety valve for him if he needs to go, D to D and he's feeling pressure. Just little things like that, you find that playing that position that forces them to communicate a lot more. Whereas at forwards, like I see those kids out there playing and they're like never talking to each other, which like kills me. It's like, especially if they're slamming, it gets me with kids. They're slamming the stick on the ice when I'm like, use your mouth, say I'm open, call for the puck. Because when you start slamming your stick on the ice, guess what? The puck comes and you're not ready for it because you're too busy slamming the stick on the ice.
Yeah, exactly.
You
and it takes energy.
Pass, and it blows up the whole play. Like, there's nothing worse, and you see this happen with a lot of kids that age. They call for the puck, and then they're not ready for it when it comes. And it's like, dude, you do that once, you're not getting
hypocrite.
Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. With the summer games going on right now, with Team USA racking up gold medals, now is one of the best times ever to get involved with Prize Picks. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than and 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into 1,000, whether you're going with summer games, whether you're going with women's basketball, whether you're going with baseball. You can go in all kinds of different directions here. If you're looking for promotions, then Prize Picks has you covered. From lowering select player stat projections on Tuesdays to helping your lineup hit or getting your entry fee back if you have a losing lineup on Fridays, there is plenty on Prize Picks to get bang for your hard-earned buck. I made my first $10 deposit and received an instant $10 bonus. If you have the skill, you can play for a shot at turning your 10 into 1,000. If it's fun and pretty simple, download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. That's download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
And then the other thing I think, and you bring up a really interesting point in hockey development with forwards becoming better forwards, playing more D. Like, you see the ice so much better. And I always found, like, as a defenseman, it made my routes better. Like, when I was on D, to watch the forwards, watch, are the defensemen pinching down on the wings when you're passing it to them on a breakout? Like, little things like that helping you. And I never went back to forward ever, but like, if I had, I knew when the D was coming as a wing because I'd watched it for so long. And like, you see the game from a different angle back there. So I would encourage, like, and you mentioned Vin does it, like, I'd encourage any youth forward, go back and play a game at D. Like, you see the game better, and you oftentimes when you have the puck in your own zone, have more time to bring it up. Because the ice is in front of you. You're not in the middle of everything. You're sort of just the beginning. You're the quarterback. So I always loved that I could bring the puck up, that I could make that first pass. I enjoyed that. It helped, my routes up ice. So I think, and I see the game differently because I played D. Whereas, if I'd played forward, I think I would have seen the game differently. And there's nothing wrong with that. And what's interesting, Haggs? I think this is fascinating. So I play in a men's league, and it's pretty competitive. I mean, the stats, refs, all that stuff. And one of my buddies growing up was a goalie, and he's a really good skater. So he plays out. He does not play in the net. And he is incredibly smart, knows where to be, knows what to do, like, in every situation, and like, just very intelligent on the ice. And it's like, well, because he's watched the game from the net. He's watched the game. And I think depending on what position you play in hockey, your view of the game is vastly different from that of others who play different positions. So, I would encourage any youth player to play every position. Because
I think with goaltending in particular, so much of goaltending is anticipating what's going to happen and reading plays. And that's why you become so smart and so good at it, because you see what the good players do, and you see what players do to make it incredibly difficult. And the spots they get to where the best scoring areas are, or the best support areas, you notice all that stuff when you're a goalie, because you're watching it all and you're anticipating and you're sort of playing along with them. So I think, and to your point too, like, it turns out, especially when you get older, like, some of your best skaters are the goalies. Like, they have to be. They have to be unbelievable on their edges and powerful and, really good skaters in order to play high-level goaltender and play as they get older. And that's why, when you're coaching kids my age, my kids' age, which one's the first year going to be a first year Pee Wee. My daughter's going to be a last year mite. You encourage even the kids that are playing goalie to still play out, rotate around, do skills as a skater rather than as a goalie, like skating, passing. Because like not only do you need to be a great skater if you're going to be a goalie, but you need to have like the passing skills. You need to be able to play the puck sometimes. You need to be able to do certain things to play goaltender in this day and age, where you're going to still need all those skills that a regular skater would have. And they're going to need to be good at the goaltending position. Like it gets me when you see kids that are like 7, 8, 9 years old that are playing exclusively goalie. And I think that's a huge mistake at that age. I think you need to have them playing out as well. You can even have them playing majority goalie, but you got to have them playing out. And this goes to defensemen too. Like so many kids that age, you see now are playing on multiple teams. They're playing like for a club team in their town. They're playing for 2 club teams. They're doing some kind of combination of that where they're playing on multiple teams at the same time. Have your kid play different positions on the 2 teams. Have your kid, if you want him to be a goalie, and I have one of Finn's teammates is like this, and it's a great, smart thing to do, have him have one team where he plays goalie all the time and have him play another team where he plays out.
That's a really good situation, actually.
And the same thing at defenseman and forward. Like you could have one team where your kid plays defenseman all the time and the other team where your kid plays forward all the time, and you get the best of both worlds there. And I think that's, I've talked to a lot of people, and we got to have sometime when you're on, I got to have John Missouri on from Arlington High School. And the three of us can have some fun talking about it. But like he's a great resource. At times I've had conversations with him just about youth hockey development and what's best for kids as they're growing up, what makes the best player, what helps them developmentally the best. And he's obviously going through it with his kids, JP now and Anthony, who's at Northeastern University now, Missouri, both really good players. But that was one of the things he recommended. And another thing that he recommended, which was fantastic, was play on one team where you can dominate. Like your kid is going to have the puck a lot, is going to play in all situations, is going to score, is going to do whatever he wants to do as a player, and is going to really develop his confidence, develop his offensive skill, like all that stuff. And then have them play on a team that is really challenging for them, where it's a lot harder for them to do all that stuff. And they almost have to, play up a little bit. And it's really fast and it's really physical and it's really hard. And, the goals don't come as easily or the plays don't come as easily and they don't have the puck on their stick as much. But if you find situations where they can do both of those things at the developmentally age levels, like when they're going up, that's what's going to end
high school,
turning them into the best. Yeah, until they get to high school, that's going to what ends up turning developmentally. That's the best thing for them, and that's what can turn them into the best player that they can be. And there's different ceilings for everybody, obviously, but.
And I agree with that. And I think the other thing that I see, and again, it's outside of our, what we cover at the Journal, but like, when you see kids at the 12 years old, 11, 10, and they're on one team and they're fighting to be on like the best team. And they're, when you're challenged all the time and you're relegated to being one of the, 5 worst kids on the team. Like, I think that's a tough thing mentally for a kid. You want to be in a spot where you're being challenged.
It becomes not fun for them. Like,
but you want to make it fun
for a kid that age. That is not fun for a kid that age.
It's not. And I remember growing up, that first year, because I just played town hockey, that first year of mites, squirts, peewees was hard.
Yes.
And it was tough for that year. It wasn't as fun. I wasn't one of the top kids on the team. Whereas the next year when I was an older kid, I was the best defenseman and this and that. So like, I love that second year. I wish though, if I could go back and do it, I wish that first year I had a more fun team. And I think one thing you see at the high school level, and we've talked a lot about different paths in high school and that there are almost too many. And I agree that there are. The one good thing about if you play full season for, let's say like Mid Fairfield or Long Island Gulls or Mount St. Charles as like as a 15-year-old, the good thing about that is you can build a lot of confidence through doing that. Now, if you're not one of the best kids on the team, then you can't, or it's harder too. But if you're gonna go to a prep school as a freshman and not play much, like it is more valuable to go and play with your own age group than and dominate or something, similar to that, or play all the time rather
Yep.
than, get a couple shifts a game as a freshman or sophomore in prep school. So I do think like, it comes into play again at that high school level where it's like, how do you want to make your time? I just did a big story, I think back in June on goalie development. I talked to Brian DeCord for it, Alfie Michaud, a lot of different people, a lot of different, very good goalie minds around the hockey world. And one thing that Brian DeCord couldn't stress enough for goalies was you need to be playing. You can't be a backup and then, you're a prep school goalie and you're finally getting the job your senior year. Like, it
Yep.
just doesn't work that way. Like, you've got to be playing at least by your junior year in high school or prep school. And that's why I think you see a lot of freshman goalies going to academies, going to things like Brian DeCord has his academy, I think it's Stop It, goaltending, like going there to play instead of sitting on the bench as a freshman. Because as you said, goaltending is all reps. It's all muscle memory. It's looking at a stick position, split second decision, and going, that puck is going to my blocker side, middle.
Yep.
It's coming, chest high. I'm getting ready for that. So I think it's important they, goalies play a lot. I think that's another big thing. But yeah, I like this conversation. I wish we could do more of these.
I know. Yeah, and we'll get to some Bruin stuff in a couple minutes. But like one other thing on that topic, like it's interesting what I see at the level that I'm coaching is you see a lot of instances where teams, organizations, even parents of the goalies will want if the best goalie, let's say you're a AAA goalie, they will put him on the AA team or the single A team or the team that's not as good. Because they're going to see a lot more pucks and they're going to get a lot more reps. And like, it's not doing, if your kid is a really good goalie, being on a dominant team where they never see shots is not going to do them any good.
I completely agree with this.
Yeah. And so you see flipping of goalies and how they're sort of viewed or evaluated, where you might take the goalie that you would think would initially would be on the top team and they get put on the second team and they switch goalies because of that, because it's not doing them any good a lot of times if they're not seeing enough action and not seeing enough game reps and just not getting challenged enough. And that can be a real problem on teams if the parity is not right and your team is too good and they just roll through other teams and they don't allow it a lot of shots on net. Like that can be a real problem for goalies developmentally.
It does. And that problem doesn't end at the youth level.
Yeah.
That problem continues, and you see that in high school when they play for their fall team. Like the Junior Eagles, for instance, you'll see, they'll play a much less team, and the goalie gets 5 shots. And I remember watching Thatcher Bernstein, who was invited to a national program evaluation camp, ended up committing to Harvard, probably the best goalie prospect from this area, definitely from the 06s, and probably the best goalie prospect from this area for the last couple of years. And, he would play with the Junior Eagles in the fall, and I'd see games of his where he'd get like 8 shots. And it's like, that's not good. I'm not a goalie. I'm not a goalie expert. I know that's not good enough.
Yep.
And I get that obviously kids want to play with their friends. So, that's a whole nother thing. They want to play with the teams they've grown up playing on. But I do always commend good goalies who will go to, less teams who are going to face a ton of shots in the fall. And I think that that's important. I think that that's vital for goaltending. It's just more pucks, and you can't get that in practice. That's one thing. Like, it's important that you're practicing against good kids, but you need and this is something Brian DeCord always stresses, you need the consequence of allowing a goal. You can allow a goal in practice; it's no big deal. But in a game, it's not. You need to save that puck.
Yes,
and having that consequence with facing 25, 30 shots. Is great for your development. It is great. So I think that gets lost. It gets lost on youth players. It gets lost on high school players. Again, you want to be in a comfortable environment. You don't want to be, facing 50 shots from kids 3 years older than you.
No.
But you do want to, get the most out of your situation and age group.
Yeah. And you do like to Brian, it's a great point by Brian DeCord. Like that's part of the reason as a coach, you build in consequences or sort of manufacture pressure in practice, through reward or punishment or whatever, because it recreates that what you're also getting in the games, that pressure to, perform under pressure, have consequences on the line. Like, it's incredibly important to have some of that stuff there, and try to create an environment in practice where that can happen, because it's the same thing happens in games, and you don't want it all of a sudden out of nowhere to be throwing that kind of stuff at them in situations and expect them to perform when they haven't been put in that situation before. Like, that's what practice is for, is to put them in those situations that they're going to find themselves in games, which includes like serious ramifications, like wins and losses, and like, kids blaming themselves after the game is over, or like, something doesn't work out for you, and how are you going to bounce back from it? And especially if it's like while the game is still going on, and you got to find a way to, get over that pothole and keep going, like all that stuff. Like, it's so important developmentally to be able to come back from that stuff. And it's on coaches to create those situations in practice too, where they continue to build the confidence that they can withstand adversity, that they can overcome it, and that they can like perform in pressure situations. All that stuff is like super important, just in general, not just like if you want to coach a hockey player and have them like play high school hockey, but if you want to, your kid or the kids you coach to be successful in life and overcome stuff that happens to them, all that stuff is like super important, and stuff that should be built into your practices for sure.
I think that's why hockey and team sports in general are so important for kids to go through, because you do. So, I mean, and again, like, I look back on youth hockey and I'll look at losses and kind of laugh, but at the time, that's the biggest thing going in your life.
Yes,
you lose a game.
Yes.
That is a big freaking deal. And
yes.
like, I remember, like in hockey, obviously it was huge losing. We lost in the state championship one year when we were in 7th grade as bantams. And I mean, it was just devastating. Like you can't comprehend it. And in baseball, I remember, in town league, playing your friends. The game is hyped up all day. Everyone's coming to the game that night and you lose.
Yep.
That stinks. Like you go 0 for 4 or whatever. And I think it's very important for kids. I didn't go 0 for 4 that much, but there were times. But it is.
You still remember that game, don't you, Evan?
I do remember those games. Yes. It's important to go through that. It is really important to go through that. As much as it's great to win and all that stuff, you need to lose. And I think, in general, like it helps you for life down the line, and it puts things into perspective, and it sort of gives you a thicker skin. And I think you need that. And hockey certainly provides that. Hockey's a tough game. Hockey is not played at, for Finn, he's not playing at 6 p.m. on Wednesdays or Saturdays. He's playing at, or growing up, he was 7 a.m. on Saturdays, or practices, it's 8 a.m. And like, that's a grind. That's not like, you've got to love hockey to play it. It's not like one of those sports you can just pick up. You've got to be fully invested. And as a parent, you know this better than anybody. You've got to be in on it. You can't be like half in, half out. You and your wife, there's probably times you're passing each other on the pike. There's probably times, you're going different directions to games on Saturdays and Sundays when you would much rather be laying in bed.
100%.
But that's hockey. That's why we love it. I'll be going through that someday where it's, I'll be texting you like, God damn. I don't know how my parents did this, but that's the fun of it. And my parents miss it a lot. My parents are now like, yeah, we really like, those are the days.
Well, that's what I tell my wife, Alyssa, a lot, because like it can be a lot sometimes. There's no question about it, especially with 2 kids playing on different teams.
Oh, yeah. And it's expensive as hell.
But yeah, it's super expensive. It's time consuming. And like, there's a lot of positives to that, like the commitment they have to have. And the bottom line with hockey, and I explain this to people when for Newton Youth Hockey, I'm kind of, one of the sort of like welcoming ambassadors, because I help run the Learn to Play program in Newton Youth Hockey. And so I get a lot of questions from parents that have never, You're
the famous ambassador. You're the one that, oh my God, he was on TV.
Yeah, exactly.
I know him. That's you.
Well, most of these people have no idea who the hell I am, and rightfully so. But they're, asking a lot of the questions like, what can I expect? Like, and I try to like set expectations and let them know, like, if you're a first-time hockey parent, you're just getting your kid into the sport, what it's going to be like. And one of the things you have to explain to them is even when they're like 5, 6, 7 years old, they're on the ice like 4 times a week. It is way more intensive in hockey than any other sport, even from the youngest age. And to your point there, the mites always get the garbage ice time. They get the 7 a.m. games. They always get the super early games because you want to try to, A, they're up early, B, you want to catch them like then rather than the middle of the day when it's just like complete like pandemonium trying to get them
It's
on
mayhem.
the ice and just listen to the coach. But like even from those young ages, they are committing a ton of time and doing a ton of work to play the sport. But it's because you play soccer, you play basketball, you play baseball, you play lacrosse, you play any of these other sports, football. What are you doing most of the time in these sports? You're running. These kids have been running since they were 1, since they could walk. Like they've been running, from the time they were toddlers. When you play hockey, you're learning a new action completely from scratch, the skating part of it. Like you have to learn that, and you have to practice multiple times a week in order to continue to build on what you're learning and build those skills and figure out how to skate, where all these other sports running comes natural. So like a lot of people will give you like the sideways glance, that give you that look when you say like they're going to be on the ice this much. And it's kind of, if you want to see them develop and you want to see them get better, you kind of have to be committed to it and be disciplined to doing all that stuff. But it's the only way when it's the most fundamentally important part of the sport is skating. And it takes years, decades to learn. Like you talk to like teenagers, pro hockey players, and they're still doing power skating, working on their edges, doing all that stuff. Like it's a lifelong sort of quest to master it, and you never really master it. So it's like, it's something that is interesting and different and separates itself. The discipline and work involved and the commitment and the sacrifice and all the stuff you have to do if you're going to be a hockey player starts from a super young age and never really peters off if you continue to want to play. But I think it does, like there are some qualities and there are some things that you get as a result of it that you don't get from other sports, I believe.
I completely agree. And, you asked me, the first question of this was, how do kids change from 14 to 18? The biggest thing, and I think it boils down to, is skating. If you're a good skater, if you're a really good skater, you can do anything. You will get moved up to teams, and it's not even just being fast.
Yep.
Fast obviously is good.
No, it's
but just being
pivoting,
a good
skating
skater.
backwards. It's like all of the
edge work.
crossovers, being able to do those when you're like 10, 11, all that stuff.
Yep, and that stuff really matters a lot. And the tough part, obviously, is it's the least fun thing to work on.
Yep.
The most fun thing to work on is your hands, right? Your shot. Everyone loves working on that stuff because it's a stick and a puck and a net, and it's fun. It's not fun when you step on the ice for practice and there's no pucks and you're doing drills that make you tired. You're doing drills that are uncomfortable. I remember doing like power skating camps where, you're doing stuff on one foot and you're not good at it. It's not natural. So like when you start out, you don't get it that quick. So they've got to come over and show you how to do it. And that's why at dev camp, the first couple days are a lot of skating drills. That matters most. Your ability, your good skating is going to get you places. And like, I'm doing a story right now on, we do a story for the August 1st. So August 1st, for those who don't know, is when rising juniors in high school can commit to a college, can verbally commit. But so we did a story on advice for kind of kids, how to approach their August 1st. We also doing a story that's coming soon on kids that are a year or two out. For what should they be doing? What should they be working on? What should they be kind of tying up before, they are being looked at for college and for Division I? And one of the big things is power skating. Go to spend time skating and spend time working on that stuff. Because if you're a good skater, you can pretty much get anywhere and do anything. And you see that at the NHL level too. And one of the big knocks on guys is, they're not a good skater. Oh, they're not a great skater. Well, that hurts you. Like that hurts you along the way a lot. You can be the most skilled guy in the world, but if you're not a good enough skater, there's not much you can do. So I would say skating's another big thing. And then one other thing you mentioned, with hockey being as intensive as it is, playing other sports, I think, is also important.
Yes.
With kids, and it gets overlooked.
Yep.
People get very into hockey, and it's hard not to. But playing a baseball, playing a lacrosse, typically a spring sport.
Soccer.
It's impossible to play basketball or football, but doing another sport. Soccer's a good one. Yep. There's lots of those with your feet. that help you, that make you good. That's why no hockey players are ever good at basketball. That's like the one sport, like you can't, there's no real crossover there.
No.
But baseball with your hand-eye and lacrosse, there's so many different things that help. And a lot of college coaches mention play other sports. You get good at other things and you just become a better all-around athlete. And it makes you better at golf when you pick it up when you're like 22 years old. So that's another thing that can help too. No personal experience there. But yes, I do think playing other sports is important.
Well, and I think there's an add benefit too of just like making sure you're getting breaks off the ice too. Like there should be like, at least a few weeks to a month to 2 months, in the summertime, like where you're just away from the ice and you miss it a little bit, and you get that like itch that you want to scratch to get back out there. And it especially at the younger ages, like I think it can turn into a real grind if like they're constantly on the ice, even through the summertime, and they don't get breaks in the summertime, because then you get back to the regular season where they're on the ice like 4, 5, 6 times a week. And it's, if you haven't been like properly refreshed before you get to that point, that's when like you start worrying about burnout and things like that, and kids not having fun. But like to your point, I every scouting person, talent evaluator in hockey that I've ever talked to said there's no way you should be specializing in hockey, certainly before high school, and probably not even before 15, 16. And if kids want to play other sports all the way up until like 17, 18 years old, they should, like you shouldn't actively discourage them if they're really good or they enjoy other sports and they want to do that. You should find a way to make it happen. And really it comes down to like part of the problem is, and this was with Finn in the spring, was that there was a time where he was playing hockey. He would do spring hockey, lacrosse, baseball, and soccer. All of those like going on in the spring, and it would be really crazy, but obviously he wouldn't get to everything. Like there'd be conflicts, there'd be stuff he couldn't go to, but I think it comes down to parents and how much they're willing to like spend time taking their kids to stuff too. Like some parents are going to be like, I'm taking you to one thing, or I'm dropping you off, or you're going to have to find your own way to get there, like whatever. And they just don't have, or they have to work, or they have like a bunch of kids and a bunch of kids going all over the place, and they just don't have the bandwidth to be able to, have their kids play all these multiple sports. I think that can be problematic too. And that can be part of the challenge, is just the amount of time that you have to spend taking your stuff when they're playing all kinds of different stuff. But I've always felt like if your kid wants to do it and they say they want to do it, and if they want to play with their friends, find a way to get them there, find a way to let them do it. And they should play as many sports as they want to. And certainly when they're young and they don't have like sort of the understanding of like, and a lot of kids nowadays, they don't want to do anything. They just want to stay home and play Roblox and play Minecraft and be on the devices. So if you leave it up to them, they're going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. You kind of have to push them and force them to do certain things, whether it's playing instruments, whether it's playing sports, whether it's any of that stuff. But I think you should do it as much as you can, and you should certainly encourage it. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time, the Red Sox, Fenway Park. Jarren Duran putting on a show at the MLB All-Star Game, so you may want to dig into your pocket and actually like spend some money on some Red Sox tickets based on Jarren Duran and the season he's having. This is one of those seasons where I think you're going to want to watch because he's in the middle of putting something together pretty special. You're going to say you were in the stands and you saw Jarren Duran like do something crazy when you were actually watching one of the games at Fenway. So go to Game Time. Last minute deals, save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater. Zone deals, save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of getting Red Sox tickets at Fenway this summer with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, create the account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's move on to some quick Bruins stuff. First of all, let's congratulate David Pastrnak for getting married. He got married over the weekend in Croatia. It looked like
he's no longer the center of his own universe.
That's right.
No,
it's no not about him anymore. That's right, Evan. We talked about that last week. Looked like Torrey Krug and David Krejci were in his wedding party, so it looked like he had a good Bruins representation in his wedding party. It looked like a lot of the Bruins players were there. I saw a picture somewhere on a boat with, I think it was Marchand, Bergeron, Carlo, and McAvoy, and their significant others all hanging out at the wedding. So congratulations to Pasta, and good luck in marriage. I hope you have a long, healthy, happy marriage, and that it makes you a better person, like it did for me when I got married 14, 15 years ago. But it sounded like he did the right thing. He went somewhere, traveled to Croatia, had it in a beautiful area where everybody goes to like summer there in Croatia because the beaches are amazing, and I'm sure it was at some crazy amazing place where they got married. But congratulations to Pasta on getting married.
Did you ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm?
Yes.
Do you remember when Cheryl and Larry renew their vows and Larry won't commit to saying for all eternity because he's like, why do I have to be tied to you for all eternity? I did one life. Is one lifetime not enough? So I always think of that when people get married. I'm like, whenever they say like for all eternity, I always think of that scene where Larry's like, seriously, really, all eternity? This isn't enough? I can't be single in heaven. So
I love Curb Your Enthusiasm, but I don't know why anybody would want to be with him for all of eternity. So he should consider himself.
That's right. And I love the, not to get political, I do love that Cheryl Hines' TV husband is Larry David and her real husband is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I think that like with the stuff that's come out with RFK, it's so funny, like the parallels between him and TV Larry.
Dude,
it's so great.
The bear thing in Central Park is like next level friggin' weird for me. Like, but
it was like, well, it's funny. Someone sent that video to me. It was like, can you believe this? And I watched because with that, I saw that video come across my Twitter feed. I watched the first like 30 seconds. Then I was like, I don't care. I don't know what this is about. I don't really care. And so when I started seeing tweets about it, I was like, oh, I should have watched that whole thing. And so then I did. It's like, holy crap.
And for some unknown reason, he's recounting the story to Roseanne Barr in the video, which makes it even stranger.
It was random. I mean,
somehow he made Roseanne Barr the straight person in the video, which like is amazing to me.
I just love, like, with all the headlines surrounding Robert F. Kennedy Jr., it's like you couldn't guess those headlines if you wanted to. Like, you could have 1,000 guesses at the next headline of his, and you wouldn't even come within a ballpark.
No.
So.
And the bottom line is, why on earth would you want some kind of weird crackpot like that with all these bizarre things going on, like in charge of the country? Like, no, thank you. Good. Give me somebody that's boring and normal and like is just gonna like not have anything interesting not have any interesting anecdotes about dumping a dead bear cub in Central Park. I'm good with that.
I love the Twitter memes. Where it's like oh, I was like, I had one cooking for a Bruins one, but then I was like, no, I don't want, like, I hate getting into the political stuff on Twitter. No. It just like it never ends well. No. So I was like, and this is a joke, but I don't want people to say, I was like, I'm not gonna. I'll save it. Maybe I'll save it. So the tweet was going to be like, my friend, the GM of the Bruins called me before the 2015 draft and asked me who they should pick with their 3 straight picks. I was going to tweet that. But, I decided against.
There you go. I think you made the right decision, Evan.
Yeah, I did.
Let's get into the Bruins prospects a little bit here with a few minutes to go on the podcast. I'd written about them in the last few weeks. And as we're headed into training camp, some of them might have legitimate chances to make the NHL roster. And one interesting one this harkens back to, I mentioned John Mazzori. This harkens back to another Middlesex League hockey coach, Jimmy Duran at Woburn High School, another great hockey coach who I've talked to plenty of times about, Finn and his hockey, and he's had great advice as well. And he's somebody I love to bounce stuff off of because he's a great person, great hockey coach. But his son, Riley Duran, I think is a dark horse candidate to win an NHL spot, and was mentioned by Don Sweeney along with Merkulov and Fabian Lysell as somebody that, could, if they, should really work their asses off this summer and really go for it in training camp. And there could be an opportunity for them, just like there was opportunities for Johnny Beecher and Matt Patra and Mason Lowry a year ago in training camp. Just your thoughts on Riley Duran potentially being a candidate. I would suspect that he would probably crack a spot in the bottom 6 and push somebody up into the top 6 if that was going to happen. Like, he would end up in the bottom 6, and Morgan Geekie or Trent Frederick or somebody like that would end up playing with Pavel Zacha and Elias Lindholm and Charlie Coyle and Brad Marchand if they were going to bump up there. But he would end up in a bottom 6 spot. But like he really opened eyes, Ryan Muginel in Providence at the end of the year. He had 11 games at the end of the year after he left Providence College, 2 goals, 4 assists, played 4 games in the playoffs. They were just really impressed with his maturity, with his all-around game, with his intelligence, his detail-oriented player. Like he already seems like he's a pro before he even got to the AHL level, which I think is a big adjustment for a lot of kids. And he was a little better, they said, offensively than they thought he was going to be. So all that stuff could translate into him getting a look sooner rather than later, just because I think he's also been a guy the last few years when he plays with his peers in the development camp, he kind of stands out for a lot of these things too. Like he's always a player you notice making plays and doing the right thing and, stepping up and scoring sometimes and showing off like some pretty good offensive skills as well. So he's been a guy that consistently, I think, has impressed Bruins officials when he's had the chance. So he's going to be an interesting one to watch in training camp.
He will, and I think you hit it there with sort of probably a bottom 6 guy with the way their lineup's shaking out. But I think he's someone, and I don't know his game great. Again, I wasn't around when he was at Lawrence Academy and stuff. But I saw a little bit of him at Providence. Maybe someday he is a middle 6 guy.
Yep.
Like that's another thing where I think there is that potential with him where, with Mark McLaughlin, I know they're the same player, but like Mark McLaughlin, another local guy, more of a bottom 6 guy, probably that's where he's probably going to be. Duran might end up being someone that, a couple of years down the road is a, third liner who's moving, up to the second line when they need a forward up there. And like, I think he sort of has that upside. In terms of this camp, I mean, we've talked about the bottom 6 a lot. There's so many guys down there, and I think when you go out and sign a guy like Max Jones, trade for a guy like Kostelic, you already have a good amount of third and fourth liners returning. There's not really room for spots, but I mean the way Duran played at Dev Camp, I mean if that continued into training camp, he's going to make it real hard. And you're going to see, I think you're going to see a lot of Duran in preseason games. Yep. Obviously, I think you're going to get to see sort of what he can bring. And that, to me, that's the real tell. Like, and does he fit the identity of what they want that fourth line to potentially be? Because the third line, I think there's so many guys vying for that.
Yep.
Who've put in more time as professionals. My guess is Duran probably opens the year in Providence. But I also think he's someone that definitely comes up throughout the year as a fill-in when there's injuries. Like I think he 100% comes up. And I am intrigued because I never, not to say I never thought he would be like a full-time NHLer all the time, but to make an impact to potentially make the team this year, I think is very good in terms of his own development.
No, I agree. I think a lot of it speaks to the maturity in his game and sort of the polish that he already had. And somebody I was talking to at Dev Camp sort of equated it to like maybe he was like that last year in Providence was like a little bored sort of at that level or wasn't challenged enough at that level anymore. And when he got to the pro level, where sometimes players that are smart, players that play a mature game, players that play with a lot of poise, players that have good details, you put them around other smart players that do the same thing and they become better. And it sort of elevates their game and it's a better fit for them and a better place for them. And that might have been, what happened between, he had a decent year his third year in Providence, but it wasn't like markedly better from his first 2 years or anything like that. But then he goes to the Providence Bruins at the end of the year, and people said that he elevated his game. Maybe it was a situation where he was just in an elevated, situation, in an elevated, with players around him. He talked about he played with Patrick Brown a lot in Providence with the Bruins, who's an established, longtime NHL guy, a very smart player. And maybe playing with guys like that actually helped him elevate his game and sort of was a better spot for him than he had been in Providence with, I think, a little less talent this past year, too, at Providence College than maybe the last 2 years before for him.
And one other thing it's interesting with him is he comes from the Friars, who have such a good coaching staff. Yep. Not just in terms of college coaching staff, but a good NHL development coaching staff. Yep. With, obviously head coach Nate Lehman and then, Ron Ralston, who has a ton of experience, not just with NHL players, but with kids who are going to be high-end NHL players, and Joel Beal. So, like, I think he also comes from a program that, like, they they know how to develop NHL talent. And they've developed NHL talent kind of in a similar way, where you have like the Nola Charis of the world who are very smart, gritty players. Providence actually, if memory serves, was like second or third for getting James Higgins. Like Providence almost got James Higgins.
Yeah.
They have Trevor Connolly coming in this year, who's a very, first round pick, high end player. John Mustard, another kid who was, I think, the second round pick, high end offensive player. So they're sort of changing, but that's a very good development staff for NHL talent and for mature, smart players. That's how they play. So it doesn't surprise me that Durant has that. And obviously Durant has his own dad. So like there's that end of it too, why he's such a smart player, which I don't know him that well. I don't know. I haven't come across him yet because I know he's coaching at Woburn. But
Woburn High School.
I've only heard great things.
Yes.
I've only heard great things.
If I ever see him and I'm with you at any of these games or anything, I'll introduce you to him because he's an awesome guy and he's fun to talk to. And interestingly enough, this ties back to what we were talking about before. When Riley played for Jimmy at Woburn High School, I think it was as a freshman, his freshman year before he went to Lawrence Academy, he played defense. He was a defenseman for the Tanners. Yeah, his first year, because that's where Jimmy, I think, really needed him to play. And then he ended up moving to forward when he went to prep school after that. But he's like, and I like too that, I think that's a good way to go for a lot of these kids that might end up in prep school, is going to their public high school, playing with their friends their freshman year, and then maybe after that deciding to make the move to a higher level, especially if they're a dominant player at that high school level. But I think that's a good way to go for a lot of these kids if that's an option. Is let them play with their friends for a year. Let them play for the high school team. Let them get that experience for at least a year, especially if they have higher goals and things in mind. Why not let them do that? I think that's something you could do for them instead of being in this big rush to, like you said, maybe go to a prep school where you're not even going to play that much. You're maybe on a fourth line, or you're a 10th or 11th forward who basically just rotates in every once in a while or doesn't even play every game. Play for your high school, play every game, play in every situation, and really be dominant, and then move on to that program the next year if you can. I'm sure a lot of families or parents or even kids, players, are worried that, there's not going to be a spot for them if they do that. But if you're good enough, there's going to be a spot for you. You'll be able to find a spot somewhere if you're a good player.
Yeah, and I think you see it, a lot of confidence obviously comes from dominating whatever level you're at before moving on to the next. And I think that, the strategy you just laid out, there are kids who go do their freshman and sometimes even sophomore years, dominate the MIAA or dominate, just whatever state they live in, high school hockey, and move on to prep after. Do your junior and senior year at prep, or do repeat your sophomore year or whatever. And Evan Jones is a great example. Evan Jones just committed to Dartmouth. He did 2 years with John Missouri at Arlington. Best defenseman both years in high school. Clearly could have went to prep school a year or two ago. Stayed at Arlington, put up a ton of points. And he's in a perfect spot. He's going to be at Belmont Hill this year. And so you can do it. If you're good, you're good. That, it really comes down to that. And I think you also can develop a lot at the high school level. And one thing, Jim Montgomery's son, JP, I think is a really good example. He did his freshman year at Winchester this year. And I throughout the year, when I caught Winchester maybe 3 or 4 times, he was better by the end of the year at facing pressure. Because in the MIAA, are they the most skilled players? No. But there's a whole student section that is going to go nuts if they put that opposing defenseman through the glass. And so that's why you see these all-out forechecks in the MIA where kids just come in not even just straight shot. I remember it. I remember
not even trying to play the puck, just trying to blow you up.
Nope. You're just getting hit. And so that takes time, but to get more comfortable with pressure as a defenseman, I think it's important. And you get that at the MIA level. You don't have a lot of time and space because kids want to kill you. So I do think that helps you too. So there's a lot of benefits, but there's a lot of paths, Haggs. There's a lot of paths. That's the biggest
100%. There always will be, especially when there's so many different leagues and teams and schools and everything else in New England and in Massachusetts. Some would say too many, but that's a different story for a different day. Any prospects, Evan, that you are going to be keeping a close eye on during Bruins training camp that you're intrigued by that you think could challenge for a roster spot?
I thought you were going to mean just like in general for the winter. I was going to say Dean Letourneau is the obvious
Yes.
one at BC.
Well, yeah, we'll all be watching.
That's going to be really fun.
Sure.
But yeah, I said this on a podcast yesterday, Georgi Markulov, because that's a guy who's been really strong in the AHL the last 2 years, and he's been productive. And, I remember talking to some hockey people at Dev Camp, and they're like, how is he going back to Providence? Like, I think he's done like everything he can do down there. Why? Like, he's, an offensive guy. Like, and so I wonder, like, there are so many things we've talked about throughout the offseason of, the first line is going to be this, the second line is going to be that, and the third line is probably going to be this. Like, does he challenge for one of those spots? Like, does he have such a great training camp that we're like, maybe like there's a spot for him in the top 6. Maybe you do slot him on the left wing and you keep Zacha down the middle, or maybe you put like Merkulov as the third line center. Like, or maybe you don't. Maybe he doesn't have a great training camp, and it's like, all right, well, he goes back to Providence.
Yep.
But I do think, like, to me, he's a fascinating one to watch in terms of like, what is the upside? What can he bring you? Can he play the left wing? Is he a better fit for that third line center spot than Matt Patra or Morgan Geekie? Like, I'm intrigued by him and then everything that comes with the Georgi Merkulov experience.
Yeah, I am too, and I just hope he gets put in spots where he can do his thing. Last year,
I agree.
I think he was very concerned about being sound defensively, being a 200-foot player, having good details. When he came up and played, I think it was third line center. He was playing for 4 games at the NHL level when he got up there, and he hit a post. He had a couple of shifts where you kind of noticed him, but for the most part, I don't think he was worried about offense. I think he was just worried about playing good defense, not getting scored on, and proving that he could do that
and
stuff.
Not getting benched.
Yeah, and kind of playing it safe. So like, I want to see him in a spot where you can kind of see him show off his offensive tools, be in a put him in a position to succeed and where he can do his best and really show what he can do. Because I don't think we saw that in the limited time we saw him in Boston last year. But yeah, I'm intrigued by him. Certainly, I think this is adding up to Fabian Lysell, like really getting a good chance to win that spot. I think he's supposed to win it. Put it that way. I think at the end of the day, you lose Jake DeBrusk, first-round talent on the right wing. He goes and signs with Vancouver. You're looking for a right wing to replace him in the top 6. You kind of have to have a certain level of offensive talent and impact in order to be a top 6 winger, especially if you're going to score goals and create offense. Lysell's a former first-round pick. It's his time now. He's around 22 or so. Like this is for him. This is and I think we talked about it on the other podcast. This is the NHL circle of life. Full credit to Lion King right there. When you lose one player like that, you have another one that you've drafted and developed that should be stepping into that spot. So I think if all goes well, if the Bruins get exactly what they want, I think they'll see a mature, dynamic, like ready for prime time Fabian Lysell come in and win that spot and play with Brad Marchand and Charlie Coyle. But Merkulov, I think, is very close to ready and doesn't have much to prove at the AHL level. And I think there are other combinations where they could promote a guy like Trent Frederick or Morgan Geekie or even Max Jones or Justin Brazeau. I think there's a lot of different players that you could put in that spot potentially that you might want to play there and could perform. But Merkulov is definitely an interesting one that I'm going to be watching in training camp. And I think he along with Lysell and Duran, were the ones that Don Sweeney name-checked on July 1 in his press conference. And I think that's a pretty important detail that people shouldn't miss. But I think we're going to wrap it up now for this episode. Evan, thank you very much for joining us.
Of course, we said before, we're like, there's not much Bruins stuff. What are we going to do? And we ended up doing like 40 minutes on hockey development. I do that every week.
There you go.
I would do that every week. I love
every once in a while, we're going to sneak one of these in. And one of these times, we're going to have like Jimmy Duran or John Mazzoria or somebody come on and shoot it around with us. Let's also thank our sponsors real quick. Prize Picks. Largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. With Team USA racking up gold medals, it's a great time to jump on with Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS for a first deposit match of up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Let's also thank Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Get your Red Sox tickets. Get to Fenway Park. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Evan, thank you very much for joining us, my friend.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Haggs.
That's it for this week's podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you at the rink.